This is MIP. Get woke.
Joining us now is Representative Darren Soto of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. He is the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Task Force Chair. Representative Soto, and we should also, of course, mention that he's representing the 9th District in Florida. Representative Soto, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me on the show.
And thank you for your patience. I'm sorry we're a little bit behind schedule. I apologize for that.
Quite all right.
But what really, first of all, I want to hear about the important work your committee is doing in terms of civil rights and voting rights. But first and foremost, you all made a statement the other day, I believe, regarding the 2020 census the Congressional Hispanic Caucus did. Tell us about you all's position on the census, if you would, please.
Absolutely. The Trump administration is pushing the census to ask a question on citizenship, a question that has not been asked since 1950, because everyone in the country, regardless of immigration status, is supposed to be counted. And we have come out in opposition. We will be also joining lawsuits to keep this off the census. This is about intimidation and discrimination. It's going to hurt a lot of states where there's diverse populations in the Sun Belt, from California to Texas to Florida, and other big states like New York. And many of them are blue states too, which I think isn't by accident. So we're obviously going to remain vigilant and work with our partners in the Tri-Caucus, the Congressional Black Caucus, as well as CAPAC, our Asian and Pacific Islander caucus, to fight this thing all the way to the end.
So the risk here is that some may fill out if that question is on there, it may fill out the form improperly or may even not fill it out at all, right?
So there's multiple issues. One,
Right.
if many people just choose not to fill it out. And if they do fill it out and they lie, that's a crime. If they leave it blank, that may not be counted. They will follow up on that question. So in the end, you're going to have a lot of people who may not fill it out. And
Right.
So we want to make sure that everybody participates, because resources are based upon people, not just citizenship. And a state like Florida will lose billions and a congressional seat or two. Texas, same thing. California, same thing. A lot of states that are driving the economy, driving the innovation in this country would be the ones hardest hit.
And unfortunately, too, Representative, just even putting that out there, on the Trump administration putting that out there, does a level of damage anyway, because he's already created this atmosphere of rounding people up and attacking people. It's even if it weren't on there, it's hard enough to get people to want to participate in the first place, isn't it?
Sure. He's spreading fear in the hopes that immigrants will be undercounted, because there's a big shift happening in this country. You'll see dozens of congressional seats go to Sun Belt states, to larger states like New York, urban areas, and that is against what he ran on, which is a anti-immigrant, pro-Anglo agenda. And a lot of those rural states are the ones that'll lose House seats. But that's the movement of the country, and he's trying to stop progress here by a campaign of fear.
Yeah, he most certainly is. Adding to that fear, of course, too, is this whole thing with the National Guard and the wall. What's your reaction to all of that of late, especially the National Guard just in the past week?
You know, we have opposed the wall from the very beginning. It's a monument of division and discrimination, and just the whole background of it does not sit well and instills anger in a lot of my constituents, because we're a very diverse area in Orlando. But the facts are that illegal immigration has dropped to
That's
a
right.
10 to 20 year low
That's
when
right.
you look at the graphs as of late. So there's no great threat. In fact, the threat is much less than it was even 5 or 8 years ago. So bringing the National Guard down there to try to supplement from the fact that we have stopped him cold on the wall is really just a move to try to allow him to save face. But we shouldn't be using the National Guard to supplant his failure to enact his terrible agenda. And there are much better things that our National Guard can be doing because there's not a threat there. He took this peaceful caravan of folks coming up from Central America that comes up every year to highlight the dangers and human rights violations down there, and he turned what was a peaceful caravan into what was going to be an invading force on Fox News, totally blowing it out of proportion. And so I think you see a lot of these things just to for show when they're not needed, and they're taking valuable resources away from places where they need to be.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. If back to the census, and hopefully you all win this battle to keep the issue of citizenship off. But whether that's there or not, are there initiatives or plans that the Congressional Hispanic Caucus is looking at to try to increase representation in terms of the census and the count? It's kind of like voting. We need to overvote to cover for those who undervote. We need to kind of overrepresent in filling out the census to cover for those who might be discouraged from doing so, don't we?
Well, one, will be encouraging people, if we cannot get that question off, to fill it out anyway. We've had our dreamers release their information to the federal government about their status.
Right.
And while it's been a ping pong back and forth as far as the program, we haven't seen that information be used to try to deport anybody. There'd obviously be strong lawsuits of what we call estoppel, where you rely on another party to your detriment. If they mess with you, then you may have a cause of action. So I think if we would tell people, I know we would tell people, fill it out, and the hope will be that we don't have to go to court to stop it from being used for immigration purposes. However, there are three ways we're fighting this. One, there are a lot of big states with Democrats and Republicans who are opposed to this.
Mm-hmm.
So we may be able to get a working majority of members of Congress to help stop this, from Texas, from my home state of Florida, New York, California, and other Sunbelt states that are on the rise population-wise. Secondly, we're going to fight it in the courts. It hasn't been there since 1950.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's going to be against an accurate count or discriminatory in a way, there is an argument to be made. And third, and as important as the rest, we have an election coming up this November, 2018. The Democrats, we are energized and are poised to potentially take the House.
Right.
And that can also be a way to stop this cold.
Yeah, no, and I would hope so. Tell us about your work, your portfolio as the chair responsible for civil rights and voting rights in the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, if you would.
So there's a few things we're working on. This is one of those. Another is that we had a rollback of the Voting Rights Act and how we could get those voting protections back. As you know, we had pre-clearance in a lot of counties across the United States that had a history of discrimination. So any voting changes had to go to a federal court. I know we had 5 of those counties in Florida, which really gave a great protection for our state legislature that's passed some very disenfranchising laws. And since there's no more pre-clearance counties, now you have to take it you have to take it bill by bill, which is so much more difficult, and it could be months after the election before it's able to be successfully challenged. So we're going to try to get in front of a lot of these voting law changes. We met with Latino Justice. We've met with the Mexican Legal Defense Fund, with the African American or Black Legal Defense Fund, the NAACP as well, and we've also met with Asian American Legal Defense Funds in meetings this past year to coordinate that effort between these legal groups. In addition, in Florida, we have a Restoration of Rights Amendment. We're one of only 4 states that does not allow automatic restoration of rights after you've completed your sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It's a total outlier. It's a legacy from discriminatory laws from earlier last century to disenfranchise African Americans. And so that'll be on the ballot. We're going to have Cedric Richmond, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, come down for a civil rights town hall in Haines City in my district on May 4th. So we'll be taking that to the streets to make sure that Floridians are aware of this discriminatory law that bars about 1.5 million people from voting in Florida. I mean, think about how many people that is. It's staggering. And then finally, we're following and working with the party and with Eric Holder and President Obama for this next redistricting. As you know, the Republicans did a record successful redistricting effort to gerrymander seats. Pennsylvania, finally, the court just struck down the map. You see several retirements as a result because they were only there because their seats were gerrymandered.
Right.
We see, though, in other states without state standards like Florida and Pennsylvania, that you have to go to the federal level, and there's not much by way of the Constitution as far as gerrymandering. So it's much more difficult for states like Texas, Wisconsin, and others, Maryland, to really have a change. So you'll see former Attorney General Eric Holder working with President Obama to get state standards in a lot of these different states, including Ohio, and really try to protect the map drawing process because if it's gerrymandered, you're disenfranchising voters. You're having politicians pick their districts rather than voters picking their representation, and it's really been a detriment to the Congress.
Representative Darren Soto of Congressional Hispanic Caucus. We've got to go shortly, Representative, but since you're a member of Congress, I'll let you respond. Trump is tweeting this morning. He's saying tremendous pressure is building like never before for the border wall and an end to crime, cradling sanctuary cities. Started the wall in San Diego where the people were really pushing hard to get it. They will soon be protected. What is he talking about?
Well, first, we just had an omnibus that was the main budget bill for a while. The wall wasn't in there. If this pressure was building up, it would have passed then. The San Diego structure is being fixed. It's not a new structure. It's just being repaired. So he's trying to salvage the fact that we defeated him on the wall by pointing to repairs that everybody agrees needs to happen. But they're not building a new border wall down there.
Right. Also, he's calling James Comey a proven leaker and liar this morning and an untruthful slime ball, the former director of the FBI. What's your reaction to
My reaction is that James Comey is telling the truth and that the president tried to seek his loyalty, which is wholly inappropriate and unlawful, and that there's clearly allegations made in that book that, if proven true, would be obstruction of justice, particularly his push to stop him from investigating Flynn, among other action items that Trump tried to assign him, and of course Comey refused.
Are you then saying, Congressman, that if it were to come for a vote for impeachment, you would vote to impeach?
So we're waiting on Mueller to finish his investigation. Should there be findings that President Trump broke the law, then yes, I would.
Okay.
But we need to have this investigation finish out because it's not just this president. We're talking about every president going forward that we're setting a precedent for. So obviously I want the investigation to conclude before I make any final decisions. But if crimes were committed, then yes, I would support impeachment.
And I mean, speaking of going forward, there has to be some establishment that even a president going forward once and for all cannot be above the law, right? I mean, that's really where we are.
Yes, and correct. But there's only one process in the Constitution because the sitting president cannot be prosecuted. They can only be impeached by the House, and then there's an impeachment trial in the Senate. That's the only way to remove a president because that's in our Constitution. It takes precedence over anything else. So this is the process to hold a president accountable.
At Hispanic Caucus on Twitter, at Rep. Darren Soto. Pleasure to meet you, sir. Congratulations on all your great work, and we support your efforts and the Hispanic Caucus's efforts, all of your efforts, but particularly what we've discussed this morning with regards to the census. We thank you, okay?
Thanks for having me on the show, Mark.
All right, it's a pleasure. Let's talk again sometime. Take care now.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, folks. So